There we are. It's the wooden footboard which actually broke in the middle there. Now, the pressure is normally on the balls of the feet, but here you can see it's cracked all the way down from the ball of his feet to the bottom. Oxford sank before the end of the wall, and they had to come back for a re-row the next day. But this, of course, has happened before we even got to the start.
Are you ready? Go!
And the 134th University Boat Race is away. Oxford rowing on the Surrey station. And they're quite close.
Cambridge!
And Cambridge look as though they may have a slight lead at the start. And Cambridge, remember, had the advantage of the Middlesex bend in the early stages. And Cambridge are going up, up by a canvas.
Cambridge have gone off very hard. And they've got the best part of a quarter of a length, something they've got to try and capitalise on. They've been warned once for their steering. They're obviously trying to crowd Oxford into the boats a bit and try and get a straight run up towards the Black Boy.
Oxford!
Oxford now being warned by the umpire, Mike Sweeney. And the crews are almost interlocking. Oxford pulling back on Cambridge.
Both crews, move apart!
He's now instructing both of them to get apart.
Move apart!
And that's all the distance that separates those two sets of blades.
There's very little between them.
Oxford have pulled back a little. They're pulling back on Cambridge. Cambridge were at least a canvas up, but they are no longer.
The danger is, if the boats get interlocked, that it's very difficult to get them apart without getting them closer in. Now the crews have come up level. Oxford pulled up level with Cambridge. Cambridge have got to hold them here so they can take advantage of their bend. Cambridge being warned again.
And Oxford are moving ahead. And out of that very close exchange there with the oars perilously near to colliding, Oxford seem to have come through it rather better and are a quarter of a length up.
Both crews left the start at about the same rate, 44. At the end of the first minute, they were down to about 37, more or less matching one another. Oxford beginning to settle down into what looks like a good rhythm, pushing out towards Barn Elms, and they've got to hold Cambridge around that first bend. At the moment, they've taken about a quarter of a length, and they look as if they're in a position to do that. Cambridge still being warned.
And the Oxford lead increases to half a length. Remember, if Oxford can stay where they are or increase their lead, then they have the advantage of the big Surrey bend.
They're still rowing stroke for stroke. Cambridge know that they've got to hold on to Oxford now. They've got to be at least even at the end of this bend, and ideally they should be some way up. It's about half a length at the moment. And they're really on the crown of the bend. This is the point where Cambridge have got to make a move if they're to stay in contact.
In fact, it looks as though Oxford are pulling away again. There's the end of the Fulham wall.
It's best part of 3/4 of a length now. Cambridge steering very close under Oxford puddles, which is a bit disturbing for the oarsmen. They can feel the turbulence. They drop their oars into the moving water thrown off by the Oxford oarsmen.
And this must be the sort of start Oxford needed. They chose the Surrey station. And Cambridge now find themselves virtually a length behind, having had the advantage of the early bend.
Yes, this is exactly what Oxford were looking for. And they're now settling down. They appear to be pulling out a bit more.
In fact, they're going away fast now. Is there trouble in the Cambridge boat? Because they seem to be dropping behind at a most amazing rate. And we have the times at the mile. Oxford reached the mile in 3 minutes and 38 seconds, which is only 7 seconds outside the record. That's fast. Cambridge 3:41, 3 seconds down.
Yes, that's a very creditable time in the conditions. It's very neutral, the conditions. Now we can see, looking towards Hammersmith Bridge, Oxford have built up to approximately a 2-length lead, and Cambridge are in considerable trouble.
They seem to drop away, Chris, very suddenly. And,
very quickly. I
being 3/4 of a length down, they were a length and a half down in no time at all.
I think they made an enormous effort off the start in the first minute and a half, and they were unable to sustain it. The question really is whether they can find the energy and the confidence to hang on and row along behind Oxford round this long bend. If they could just get within quarter or half a length of the Oxford stern and keep sufficient pressure on Oxford, then they might have a chance. The problem here is that Oxford have got very little pressure on them now, and they can afford to relax and row well within themselves, whereas Cambridge are under very intense pressure.
So now they approach Hammersmith Bridge. Hammersmith Bridge is the 1 3/4 mile mark. It's another of the main timing positions. And the only hope for Cambridge now is to try to hold on and find something later.
And Oxford have settled down into their normal stride rate, 33, 34 strokes a minute. It's a rate they seem to be most comfortable at. And 4 big men in the middle, punching the boat along. This is probably rather better than they hoped for. I can't imagine they thought they were going to get this far up this quickly.
The record time to Hammersmith Bridge is 6 minutes 24.
Outside that this year.
It was 7 seconds down on the mile record, and presumably a bit more at Hammersmith.
I think a bit more. The pressure's come off them a bit now, and they're able to relax a little.
So Hammersmith Bridge is shot by Oxford, and Cambridge now are perhaps 3 lengths behind.
I just think they're nearly 10 seconds back. Oxford.
The great armada of boats following this race. Jubilation, no doubt, aboard the Oxford launch, and a touch of sorrow, I suspect, aboard the Cambridge launch. But with this race, you never know. Anything can happen. And the time at Hammersmith Bridge, Oxford reached it in 6:34. That's 10 seconds outside the record. Cambridge 9 seconds down, 6:43.
Yes, they're about 3 lengths.
So this mature Oxford 8 with 5 postgraduates in it, a man of 29 in the boat, another of 25, another of 24. The Oxford 8 fulfilling everything that was said about them in the early stages of training.
Yes, I think very much a question here of cool heads under pressure there. They weren't thrown out by Cambridge's initial spurt off the start, were allowed themselves to get into a good stride, and rode right past Cambridge after the first minute and a half. Rowing as well as I've seen them now.
Well, here's an extraordinary scene. This is a pleasure boat which is across the river at Chiswick and right in the path of the race.
I think probably it should be reasonably clear here. It's the crews should be in the middle of the river here, and this is actually parked, I think, just behind the air. You can see the Oxford crew, the wake cutting through the water there, hugging well to Surrey. They're well over. The tide here is normally nearer the centre of the river.
Oxford with Cambridge in sight and can now gauge their rowing to keep themselves comfortably ahead, all being well with the 8. And Cambridge, who now somehow have to find something if they're going to save this race, but the task at this point really does look quite impossible. But things do happen in the boat race.
Well, they don't look too distressed at the moment. It's just a question, really, whether they can actually do anything to close the gap.
may not have lost any more way. They still look about 3 lengths behind.
Yes, it looks pretty similar, but there was a vital 3 to 4 minutes in the race between Barn Elms and Harrods where they slipped 2 lengths, which was absolutely crucial. Oxford were able to get into their stride. Big men, any crew that averages 14.5 stone is very large indeed.
It's rather sad for Cambridge because the general feeling, I think, Chris, was that if the conditions were calm, that would improve Cambridge's chance considerably.
Yes, except oddly enough, in rough water, Cambridge had proven to be a little more efficient to the observers than Oxford seemed to be, but they were giving away a lot of strength. But there's nothing wrong with the size of the Cambridge crew. It's perfectly respectable. And we have a slight obsession with weight in the boat race, I think, because looking wider to international rowing, it's very often not the biggest crew that wins. And in some respects, over these longer distances, it should be the longer, leaner crews who might have the advantage. It's more a question of how well they row. And Oxford are applying themselves more efficiently.
Should we expect to see a spurt from Cambridge at some time here?
I think they'll be expecting to spurt throughout this piece to try and actually close the gap. But at the moment, it's staying pretty well the same. It looks 3.5 lengths, possibly even a shade more now.
And still the Great Surrey Bend unwinding.
This Oxford crew actually is characterised by very strong leg drive, something one sees a lot in Mike Spracklin's crews.
And the 3rd timing point has been reached, Chiswick Steps, and Oxford have reached Chiswick Steps in 10 minutes and 37 seconds. This is quite a fast race. That's now 19 seconds outside the 22 seconds outside the record time to Chiswick Steps. And Cambridge were 11 seconds down at that point. But it's a good time. It's going to be perhaps a slightly faster race than we thought.
Yes, Oxford are maintaining the pressure. They're keeping going all the way. As long as they keep those legs driving down. The legs are the vital part in rowing. Fast speed with the legs against a strong back, drawing with their shoulders. If the legs, which are sort of the piston drivers of the boat, keep moving fast and hard, the boat will keep going forward. It's the essence of Mike Spracklin's coaching. Mike Spracklin has coached every gold medal crew in this country for the last 10 years.
Well, the strain surely now beginning to show on the faces of the Cambridge crew. It gives you a good idea, doesn't it, that shot, of just what sort of effort is required to row in this remarkable race. And Oxford, well, they're feeling the pressure too, naturally enough, but the strain is off them now. Lobbenberg looks back just to see how much he's got in hand.
It's definitely a lot easier to sit 3 lengths up. You've got a great deal in hand and you can actually watch exactly what's happening.
Just a little comparison with last year's time, of course, in those terrible conditions. Oxford have reached Chiswick Steps today in 10 minutes 37. Last year they got there in 12 minutes 15. So that gives you an idea of how bad the conditions were.
No two races are the same on this course. Oxford must be beginning to smell the sweet smell of victory. 4 to 5 hours a day of training coming to fulfilment. We've got to reach it in perfect physical condition, but also technical condition. The crew's actually got to function perfectly as a unit. A rowing boat's only as good, a crew's only as good as its weakest member. It's very much ultimate event for teams. There's no room for individuality.
So the lead, about between 3 and 4 lengths, by the look at that. They haven't pulled away any more, but then they're probably not even trying to now.
No, I think they're happy to sit with what they've got.
Now there's Barnes Railway Bridge, which is the penultimate timing point. That is at about 3.5 miles, and the full distance is 4 miles, 374 yards. They have to shoot the central span. Very old railway bridge this. It was opened in 1849.
Certainly Oxford aren't letting the strain off. They're still at their 33-34, which they've been at for the bulk of the course. This is their optimal cruise rate, so they're obviously not prepared to let it go. Cambridge must be maintaining the pressure. It's just that at a crucial part of the course, this Oxford crew work substantially quicker.
So the Oxford 8 at bow, Hugh Pelham, Paul Gleeson 2, Richard Hull at 3, Chris Penny, the president, at 4. A triumphant day for this American. Tom Cadoux-Hudson at 5, Gavin Stewart, the giant, at 6, who had to have the replaced stretcher. Jonathan Searle, the youngest man in the race, at 7. Stroke Mike Gaffney, and Cox, Andy Lobbenberg. And we're talking about a winning 8. And this is the wash that's being thrown up on the banks by the great flotilla following this race. The time at Barnesbridge, Oxford, 14 minutes and 35 seconds, and Cambridge were 15 seconds down.
And this will be the time when Cambridge will be feeling very weary indeed. All thoughts of victory probably now far from their minds. It's just a question of holding on, trying to keep the machine together, stop it from breaking down.
So we're coming towards the finish now of the 134th boat race, and it's been another triumph for Oxford. Despite all the trouble in the boat race last year, Oxford came out winners with a revamped crew, and now under their new president, Chris Penny, who was at the centre of all that trouble last year, who declined to row in the race last year. He's now bringing his crew home to victory.
Yes, and all sense of tiredness will be banished from their minds. You can row, it seems, forever when you're in a winning, commanding position like this in the boat race. You probably feel as if you could fly.
So Oxford will go ahead in the post-war records by 22 races to 21. Oxford's 64th win in the race coming up. They're now only 5 behind Cambridge.
Certainly it's going to be back to the drawing boards for Cambridge again. Oddly enough, all through the winter training, Cambridge actually showed an edge in the sort of small boat rowing they were doing. And Oxford and Cambridge sometimes race one another. Showed well there, but come the big day, it's been Oxford all the way.
And now the finishing post coming up, and Oxford are comfortably going to get there first. Another triumph on this smooth water of the Thames. The flag raised, and down it goes, and Oxford have won the 134th University Boat Race. Jubilation aboard. But Cambridge have still to come in, and here they are. And they're quite a long way behind. Cambridge home, losers for the 2nd year running. And as always, despair and exhaustion in the losing boat, and joy and exhilaration among the winners. And have Cambridge, they've hardly the breath to raise a hurrah. The time, Oxford won in 17 minutes 35, and that's pretty fast. 17:35 is one of the best times of recent years, and they've won by 16 seconds over Cambridge.